The blood-red sun sank beneath the distant mesas as Emma Hawkins pressed her hands against her swollen belly, feeling the familiar flutter of life inside her even as death threatened to claim them all. The Nevada Territory stagecoach rattled beneath her, its wooden frame creaking in protest as the driver pushed the team of 6 horses to their limit, desperately trying to outrun the masked riders closing in from behind. It was May 1875, and Emma was 8 months pregnant with her late husband's child. Just 3 months earlier, influenza had stolen Thomas from her, leaving her a widow at 22. With no means to support herself in San Francisco, she had reluctantly decided to accept her cousin's invitation to come live with her family in Centralia, Nevada. The mining town was nothing like the cosmopolitan life she'd known, but it offered shelter and family at a time when she desperately needed both. "Get down!" the driver shouted as the first gunshot cracked across the open desert. Emma ducked as instructed, huddling close to the elderly woman beside her, who clutched her handbag with white-knuckled terror. Across from them, a well-dressed businessman and a young soldier both pressed themselves against the floor of the coach. "Highway robbery," the businessman muttered. "Savages." Another shot rang out, followed by a pained cry from atop the coach. The vehicle lurched violently as the driver lost control, sending Emma crashing against the side of the carriage. She cried out, cradling her belly protectively as the stagecoach tilted, teetered precariously, then crashed onto its side in a spray of dust and broken wood. For several terrifying moments, Emma couldn't breathe as bodies pressed against her in the confined space. The elderly woman's weight pinned her leg, while the businessman's valise had struck her shoulder. Dust choked the air as horses whinnied in panic outside. "Nobody move!" a gruff voice commanded. "This is a robbery. Cooperate and you might live to see tomorrow." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as she struggled to free herself from the tangle of limbs. The baby kicked vigorously, as if protesting the chaos, and Emma whispered soothing words while trying to assess her situation. The carriage door, now facing upward, was wrenched open, and harsh sunlight flooded the interior. "Out! All of you! Now!" the voice demanded. One by one, they climbed from the overturned coach. The businessman went first, followed by the soldier who helped the elderly woman. When it was Emma's turn, her pregnancy made the awkward climb impossible until rough hands grabbed her arms and hauled her out with little regard for her condition. "Look what we got here, boys," said the man who'd pulled her from the coach. His face was hidden behind a red bandana, but his eyes gleamed with malice beneath the brim of his hat. "A little lady in the family way." Emma stood shakily, dust coating her traveling dress, as she surveyed their attackers. 5 men on horseback surrounded them, all armed, all masked. Near the front of the coach, the driver lay motionless in a growing pool of blood. The guard who had ridden shotgun was nowhere to be seen. "Please," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have nothing of value." "Shut your mouth," snapped another robber, this one wearing a black bandana. "Empty your pockets, all of you. Jewelry, money, watches, everything goes in the bag." The businessman reluctantly surrendered his gold pocket watch and wallet. The soldier had little more than a few dollars to his name. The elderly woman sobbed as she removed her wedding ring. When they turned to Emma, she silently handed over the small purse containing what little money she had left for her journey. The robber in the red bandana snatched it, then noticed the gleam of gold at her throat. "That too?" he demanded. Pointing to the locket she wore, her last gift from Thomas, containing a small portrait of him inside. "Please no," Emma begged, her hand covering the precious item. "It has no real value, only sentimental." The man's hand shot out, striking her across the face with enough force to send her stumbling backward. "I said everything." As Emma fell, a sharp pain knifed through her abdomen. She cried out, clutching her belly as she landed hard on the packed earth. The baby! Terror flooded her as the pain intensified. You didn't need to hit her, the soldier protested, moving toward Emma. A gunshot exploded, and the soldier crumpled to the ground with a hole in his chest, his young face frozen in shock. Anyone else want to be a hero? The black bandana robber asked, his revolver still smoking. Emma barely registered the horror unfolding around her as another contraction gripped her body. It was too soon. The baby wasn't due for another month. She bit her lip to keep from screaming, knowing instinctively that showing weakness now might mean death. What's in the strongbox? Red Bandana demanded of the businessman, who had identified himself as the Wells Fargo agent. Just mail and documents, the man stammered. The payroll shipment isn't until next week. Red Bandana spat on the ground. Check it anyway, he ordered one of his companions, who moved to the overturned coach and began working on the strongbox secured to its rear. While the outlaws were distracted, Emma noticed movement in the nearby brush. A flash of movement, the glint of sunlight on metal. Someone was watching, hidden among the scrubby desert vegetation. Her heart leapt with hope, but she quickly averted her gaze, not wanting to alert the bandits. Nothing but papers, reported the robber who'd checked the strongbox. No money. Red Bandana cursed violently. We risked our necks for this? He turned his anger toward the passengers. Which one of you is holding out on us? No one spoke. Emma tried to control her breathing as another contraction seized her, closer to the last one than she'd expected. The baby was coming, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The leader of the robbers paced in front of them, his boots kicking up dust with each angry step. Well, if we ain't getting paid in gold, we'll take payment another way. His eyes lingered on Emma, and a chill ran through her that had nothing to do with her labor pains. Take the horses, he ordered two of his men, and shoot the rest of these witnesses. No, the elderly woman wailed. Please, I have grandchildren. Shut up, old woman, Black Bandana snarled, raising his gun. The crack of a rifle split the air, but it wasn't from any of the robbers. Black Bandana jerked backward, a red stain blossoming across his chest, before he crumpled to the ground. The other outlaws whirled toward the source of the shot, drawing their weapons. It's an ambush, one of them shouted. Another shot rang out, dropping a second bandit from his saddle. The remaining three scattered, firing blindly toward the brush where the shots had originated. Emma took advantage of the chaos to crawl toward the overturned stagecoach, seeking any shelter from the flying bullets. The Red Bandana leader spotted her movement and turned his gun in her direction. You're not going anywhere, he growled, taking aim. A third rifle shot echoed across the desert, and Red Bandana's weapon flew from his hand, accompanied by his howl of pain. Blood poured from his shattered fingers as he clutched his wounded hand to his chest. Retreat, he bellowed to his remaining men. Fall back. The outlaws didn't need to be told twice. They mounted their horses, Red Bandana struggling one-handed into his saddle, and galloped away across the desert, leaving their dead companions behind. Emma collapsed against the coach, a contraction so strong washing over her that she couldn't hold back her cry of pain. The baby was coming now, regardless of the circumstances. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up fearfully, not knowing if friend or foe approached. A tall figure emerged from the brush, rifle in hand. He wore the practical clothes of a frontiersman's sturdy trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but Emma could see he was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with several days' worth of beard darkening his jaw. Madam, he said, his voice deep but gentle as he knelt beside her. Are you hurt? The baby? Emma gasped, gripping her belly. It's coming. Concern flashed across the stranger's face. Now? Here? Emma nodded, unable to speak as another contraction seized her. The man looked around at the grim scene, the dead driver, the murdered soldier, the shaken survivors. "My name is Finn Irving," he said, making a quick decision. "I've got a camp not far from here. We need to get you somewhere safe before those outlaws circle back with reinforcements." Emma wanted to ask how he happened to be in the right place at the right time, but another contraction hit, stealing her breath. Finn turned to the businessman and elderly woman who were still in shock from the ordeal. "My horse is tied up in those trees," he said, pointing. "It's about a mile to my camp. Can you two make it on foot? I need to carry her." The businessman nodded. "I'll help, Mrs. Thornton. You take care of the young lady." Without waiting for further discussion, Finn gently lifted Emma into his arms. She gasped at the sudden movement, but his grip was secure and surprisingly gentle for a man of his obvious strength. "I'm sorry, madam," he said. "This ain't ideal, but we need to move quick." "Emma," she managed between shortened breaths. "My name is Emma Hawkins." Finn nodded as he carried her toward the trees where his horse waited. "Hold on, Mrs. Hawkins. I've delivered foals before, but never a baby. Guess there's a first time for everything." Despite her pain and fear, Emma found herself laughing weakly at his grim humor. "It's my first time too," she admitted. Finn's camp was a small but well-organized setup near a natural spring that fed a modest stream. A canvas tent stood beneath the shelter of a large cottonwood tree, and a fire pit surrounded by stones showed evidence of recent use. By the time they arrived, Emma's contractions were coming every few minutes. Finn laid her gently on his bedroll inside the tent, then hurried to fetch water from the spring. The businessman and elderly woman arrived shortly after, both exhausted from their walk but immediately offering to help. "I was a nurse during the war," Mrs. Thornton said, rolling up her sleeves. "I've helped deliver babies before." Emma had never been so grateful for anything in her life. As another contraction racked her body, she gripped the older woman's hand. The next hours passed in a blur of pain, encouragement, and effort. Finn remained outside the tent, pacing nervously, occasionally bringing fresh water or cloths as requested by Mrs. Thornton. The businessman, who introduced himself as Harold Palmer, kept watch for any sign of the returning outlaws. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of purple and gold, Emma's child entered the world with a healthy cry that echoed across the quiet landscape. Mrs. Thornton cleaned the squalling infant with water that Finn had warmed over the fire. "You have a beautiful son, my dear," the older woman announced, wrapping the baby in a clean shirt that Finn had sacrificed for the purpose. Tears streamed down Emma's face as her son was placed in her arms. Despite the trauma of the day, despite the loss and fear and uncertainty, the weight of this tiny life against her chest filled her with wonder and love so powerful it took her breath away. "He's perfect," she whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. Mrs. Thornton smiled tiredly. "What will you name him?" Emma looked down at her son's face, already seeing echoes of Thomas in the shape of his nose and chin. "James," she decided. "James Thomas Hawkins." A shadow fell across the tent opening, and Finn's voice came tentatively from outside. Is everyone all right in there?" "Come in, Mr. Irving," Mrs. Thornton called. "Meet the newest traveler on the Centralia stage line." Finn ducked through the tent flap, his tall frame having to stoop considerably. His eyes widened at the sight of Emma cradling her newborn son. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words, his weathered face softening as he gazed at the tiny bundle. "Well now," he finally managed, removing his hat. "Ain't he something?" Emma smiled up at the man who had saved their lives. "Thank you, Mr. Irving. If you hadn't come along when you did." Finn shook his head. No need for thanks, Mrs. Hawkins. I'm just glad I was tracking those outlaws when I was. Tracking them? Palmer asked from the tent entrance. You're a lawman? A shadow crossed Finn's face. No, sir. Just a man with a score to settle. He looked away, his jaw tightening. Those are the same gang that hit a stage outside of Carson City last month. My brother was the driver. They killed him for a shipment that wasn't worth the powder it took to fire the shots. His words hung in the air, heavy with grief and unspoken rage. Emma felt a pang of sympathy for this stranger who had risked his life to save theirs, even while carrying such a burden. I'm sorry about your brother, she said softly. Finn nodded, acknowledging her sympathy without meeting her eyes. We should rest while we can. At first light, I'll need to get you folks to safety. Centralia's about 2 days' ride from here. 2 days, Mrs. Thornton exclaimed. But this young woman just gave birth. She can't travel so soon. Finn ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I know it ain't ideal, madam, but those outlaws are still out there. They lost 2 men today, and their leader's nursing a busted hand thanks to my shooting. They'll be looking for revenge, and they know this general area. He's right, Palmer agreed reluctantly. We're not safe here. Emma looked down at her sleeping son, so new to this world and already facing such danger. I can travel, she said with determination she didn't entirely feel. Whatever it takes to keep my son safe. Finn's eyes met hers, and she saw respect in them. We'll take it slow, he promised, and I'll rig something up to make you and the little one as comfortable as possible. True to his word, by morning Finn had fashioned a kind of litter that could be pulled behind his horse. He padded it with blankets and the canvas from his tent, creating a sheltered space where Emma could lie with baby James. It ain't pretty, he apologized as he helped her settle into it. But it should keep you both protected from the sun, and it'll ride smoother than being on horseback. Mrs. Thornton and Palmer would take turns riding Finn's horse while he led it on foot. It wasn't an ideal arrangement, but it was the best they could manage under the circumstances. As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed Finn studying the distant horizon with a troubled expression. What is it? She asked. Dust cloud, he said grimly, pointing to a faint smudge in the distance. Riders coming this way. Could be nothing, but I don't like to take chances. They departed immediately, Finn setting a pace that was cautious enough for Emma's condition but urgent enough to put distance between them and whoever might be following. The journey was difficult. The desert sun beat down mercilessly. Water was scarce, and Emma's body ached from childbirth, but whenever she felt her resolve weakening, she would look at her son's face and find renewed strength. Finn proved to be not only their protector but also an unexpected source of comfort. He seemed to anticipate their needs before they voiced them, finding shade when the sun grew too intense, identifying edible plants to supplement their meager provisions, and keeping watch through the night while they slept. Despite his obvious preoccupation with tracking the outlaws, he showed remarkable gentleness toward Emma and baby James. On the second night, as they camped in the shelter of a rocky outcropping, Emma awoke to find Finn sitting nearby, his rifle across his knees, staring into the small fire he'd built. You should sleep, she said softly, careful not to wake James or the others. You've been on watch all night. Finn glanced over, surprised to find her awake. I'm fine, Mrs. Hawkins, used to long nights on the trail. Please call me Emma, she said. After all we've been through, formality seems unnecessary. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Emma, then. He hesitated. How's the little one doing? Sleeping peacefully, which is more than I can say for his mother, Emma admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men, hear the gunshots. Finn's expression darkened. The Blackwell gang has been terrorizing this territory for months. The law can't seem to catch them, or maybe they ain't trying hard enough. Is that why you're tracking them? Because the law won't. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. Partly, but mostly because of Caleb, my brother. He was all the family I had left. His voice grew rough. Whoever you love in this world, you protect. That's how I was raised. Emma thought of Thomas, gone so suddenly from her life, and of the child he'd never know. I understand, she said. More than you might think. Finn studied her for a long moment, seeming to see beyond her immediate circumstances to the grief she carried. Your husband? He asked gently. Emma nodded, absently touching her bare ring finger. She'd removed her wedding band months ago when her fingers had swollen with pregnancy. Influenza took him in January. We'd been married less than 2 years. I'm sorry, Finn said, and the simple sincerity in his voice touched her more deeply than elaborate condolences had. I was traveling to stay with my cousin in Centralia, Emma explained. I have no means to support myself in San Francisco, especially not with a child. Finn nodded thoughtfully. Centralia's a decent town, growing fast with the silver mines but not as rough as some. Your cousin, does he have family of his own? She, Emma corrected. Martha married a mining engineer. They have 2 children already. They know you're coming? Emma smiled ruefully. They're expecting a heavily pregnant widow, not a mother with a newborn. I hope they won't mind the early arrival. Any fool can see you and that boy are a blessing, not a burden, Finn said with unexpected vehemence. Emma was startled by his conviction, and something warm unfurled in her chest at his words. Before she could respond, James began to fuss, and she turned her attention to her son, unaware of how Finn's eyes lingered on the two of them, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. The next day brought them within sight of Centralia. The town sprawled across a valley floor, surrounded by the mountains that held the silver deposits responsible for its rapid growth. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and the steeples of 2 churches stood above the other buildings. Even from a distance, they could hear the rhythmic pounding of the stamp mills crushing or, "We made it, Mrs." Thornton said with relief. Thank God. But their ordeal wasn't quite over. As they descended the trail toward town, Finn suddenly raised his hand, signaling them to stop. His posture had gone rigid, alert. What is it? Palmer asked. Riders, Finn said tersely. Coming up from town. 4 of them. Emma's heart began to race. The Outlaws? Finn shook his head. Can't tell yet, but let's not take chances. He led them off the trail into a stand of pinyon pines that offered some concealment. Stay here while I scout ahead. Before anyone could object, he had vanished among the trees, moving with the silent efficiency of a man accustomed to wilderness survival. Emma held James close, whispering reassurances as they waited anxiously for Finn's return. 10 minutes later, he reappeared, his expression grim. It's them all right. Red Bandana's got his hand wrapped up, just like I expected. They're heading for the saloon in town. How did they find us? Mrs. Thornton wondered. They didn't, Finn replied. They're not tracking us. My guess is they're planning to lie low in Centralia for a while. Maybe spend some of whatever they've stolen. We should alert the sheriff, Palmer suggested. Finn's laugh was short and bitter. Sheriff Daniels is more interested in his poker games than law enforcement. And even if he wasn't, we've got no proof. It would be our word against theirs. But you saw them kill that poor soldier and the stage driver, Emma protested. And they'll say I'm lying, Finn countered. I've got a reputation for hunting them, which means anything I say will be dismissed as a grudge. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. No, if there's going to be justice, it'll have to come another way. Emma didn't like the cold determination in his voice. Finn, please don't do anything reckless. You've gotten us this far safely. His expression softened as he looked at her. Let's get you to your cousin's house first. Then I'll decide what to do about the Blackwell gang. They circled wide around the main road, approaching Centralia from the east to avoid any chance encounter with the Outlaws. The town was bustling with activity miners coming off their shifts, merchants hawking goods, women hanging laundry in the yards of modest homes. It was a far cry from San Francisco, but in that moment, it represented safety to Emma. Martha's house was near the edge of town, a neat two-story structure painted white with green shutters. A small garden flourished in the front yard, and a swing hung from the broad porch. As they approached, a woman about Emma's age emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. Her expression changed from curiosity to shock as she recognized her cousin. "Emma?" she called, hurrying down the garden path. "Good heavens, what happened? We weren't expecting you for another week." And she broke off, noticing the bundle in Emma's arms. "Is that?" Emma managed a weary smile. "Martha, meet your new second cousin, James." He was in rather a hurry to join the world. Martha's eyes widened as she took in the disheveled state of the travelers and the makeshift litter on which Emma had journeyed. "Come inside, all of you, right away," she insisted. "You look half dead from the trail." The next hour was a flurry of activity as Martha fussed over them, providing water for washing, fresh clothes, and a hearty meal of stew and biscuits. Her husband, Edward, returned from the mines and was quickly brought up to speed on their ordeal. He immediately offered Palmer and Mrs. Thornton lodging until they could arrange transportation to their original destinations. Through it all, Finn remained somewhat apart, accepting Martha's hospitality with quiet gratitude but clearly uncomfortable in the domestic setting. Emma noticed how his eyes kept drifting to the windows, toward the center of town where the Blackwell gang was holed up in the saloon. After the meal, as Martha showed Mrs. Thornton to the guest room and Edward took Palmer to the barn to check on Finn's horse, Emma found herself alone with Finn on the porch. James was sleeping peacefully in a cradle that had once belonged to Martha's children. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Emma asked without preamble. Finn didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Those men killed my brother. They tried to kill you and that innocent baby. They've probably killed dozens more we don't even know about. Someone has to stop them, and that someone has to be you." He met her eyes steadily. "Yes, madam. I believe it does." Emma stepped closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "Then promise me something, if I can. Promise me you'll be careful," she said. "Promise me you won't throw your life away for revenge. Justice, yes. Revenge, no." Finn's expression softened as he looked at her. "That's asking more than you know, Emma." "I know exactly what I'm asking," she replied. "I've lost someone I loved to senseless death. I know the hole it leaves. Don't inflict that same pain on someone who might care about you." "And is there someone who might?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Emma felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. "There could be," she admitted. "Given time." Something flickered in Finn's eyes, hope, perhaps, or longing, but he quickly masked it. "Time is something I can't promise right now, but I'll try to come back." It wasn't the assurance she wanted, but Emma recognized it was all he could honestly give. She nodded, accepting his terms. "I'll pray for your safe return." Before either could say more, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention to the road. A dust cloud announced the arrival of several riders, and as they came into view, Emma gasped. It was the Blackwell gang, with Red Bandana in the lead, riding slowly past Martha's house. Finn pulled Emma back into the shadows of the porch, his body tense beside hers. The Outlaws didn't stop, continuing toward the edge of town, but Red Bandana turned his head as they passed, his eyes scanning the property with dangerous interest. "They're leaving town," Finn murmured. "This might be my best chance." Emma clutched his arm. "They saw us, didn't they? They know we're here." "Maybe," Finn conceded. "Or maybe they're just being cautious." He gently disengaged her grip on his arm. "Either way, I need to follow them. If they get away now, they'll just murder more innocent people." "At least wait until morning," Emma pleaded. "Rest, prepare properly." Finn shook his head. "By morning they could be miles away, or split up so I can't track them all." He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I have to go now, Emma." She wanted to argue further, to beg him to stay, but she knew it would be futile. This mission of justice or vengeance, perhaps both, had driven him across the Nevada desert for months. He wouldn't abandon it now. "Then go," she said softly. "But remember your promise to try to return." Finn's gaze dropped to her lips for a heartbeat, and Emma thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand once more before releasing it. "Take care of that boy of yours. He's lucky to have a mother with your courage." With that, he turned and strode toward the barn where his horse waited, his shoulders set with grim determination. Emma watched him go, a strange mixture of fear and admiration filling her heart. In just 3 days, this quiet, intense man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully explain, even to herself. Inside the cradle, James stirred and began to fuss. Emma went to him, lifting him into her arms with practiced ease despite having been a mother for only days. As she soothed her son, she found herself gazing out the window toward the mountains where Finn would soon be tracking the outlaws. "Your timing is terrible, Finn Irving," she whispered. "Just terrible." The next few days passed in a blur as Emma adjusted to life in Martha's household. Her cousin was a godsend, helping with James and ensuring Emma had time to rest and recover from both childbirth and the arduous journey. Edward proved equally welcoming, setting up a proper nursery in the small bedroom adjoining Emma's. Mrs. Thornton departed on the next eastbound stage, heading home to her grandchildren in Missouri, while Palmer took the westbound coach back to his Wells Fargo office in Sacramento. Both promised to write once they reached their destinations safely. Though outwardly Emma participated in the domestic routines of the house, her thoughts frequently strayed to Finn. There had been no word from him since his departure, and with each passing day her worry deepened. Had he found the outlaws? Was he injured or worse? The not knowing gnawed at her. Martha noticed her preoccupation. "You care for him, don't you?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, shelling peas while James slept nearby. Emma sighed. "It's foolish, I know. I barely know him." "Sometimes a few days can tell you more about a person's character than years of casual acquaintance," Martha observed. "And from what you've told me, he seems like a good man." "He is," Emma agreed. "But he's consumed by this need for justice. I'm afraid it will destroy him, even if he succeeds." Martha nodded thoughtfully. Men often struggle to find the balance between strength and gentleness. The good ones manage it eventually. She patted Emma's hand. "Have faith." A week after Finn's departure, Emma was in the garden harvesting vegetables for dinner when she heard commotion in the street. Voices raised in alarm drew her attention, and she looked up to see several townspeople running toward the center of Centralia. Martha emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's happening?" "I don't know," Emma replied. She handed her cousin the basket of vegetables. "Will you check on James? I want to see what's going on." Emma followed the crowd to the main street where a dusty rider had just arrived. The man was speaking rapidly to Sheriff Daniels, gesturing back the way he had come. As Emma drew closer, she could make out his words. "All 4 of them, tied to their saddles and lined up neat as you please outside the mining office." Notes pinned to their chests confessing to stage robberies from here to Carson City. The sheriff looked flummoxed. And you say there was no sign of whoever brought them in? None, the writer confirmed. Just those outlaws, trussed up like Thanksgiving turkeys, with that red-headed one cursing a blue streak about some sharpshooter who busted his hand. Emma's heart leapt. Finn had done it. He'd captured the entire Blackwell gang single-handedly and delivered them to justice without bloodshed. But where was he now? She scanned the gathering crowd, hoping to see his tall figure among them, but he wasn't there. Disappointment settled heavily in her chest. Had he moved on already, seeking other wrongs to right? Had he forgotten his promise to try to return? With a heavy heart, Emma turned back toward Martha's house. She had almost reached the garden gate when she spotted a lone figure standing in the shadow of the cottonwood tree that grew beside the porch. Her steps faltered as recognition dawned. Finn! He stepped forward into the light, and Emma's breath caught. He looked tired, with several days' growth of beard darkening his jaw and a new cut healing above his right eyebrow. But he was wonderfully, beautifully alive. I heard you caught them, she said, moving toward him slowly, hardly daring to believe he was really there. All four, he confirmed. Tracked them to an abandoned mine where they were dividing up their loot. Waited until nightfall when they were sleeping off their whiskey, then took them one by one. A grim satisfaction colored his voice. They won't hurt anyone else now. Emma stopped an arm's length away from him. And your brother? Does this bring you peace? Finn's expression grew thoughtful. Not peace exactly, but maybe the start of it. He hesitated, then added, I realized something while I was out there, tracking them. What's that? That vengeance is a poor companion for a man's future. His eyes held hers steadily. I've been living with ghosts for too long, Emma. It might be time to try living with the living again. Hope unfurled in Emma's chest, fragile but persistent. And where will you start this new way of living? Finn took a step closer, close enough that Emma could see the uncertainty in his eyes despite his confident words. I thought I might start right here in Centralia. I hear they need a deputy, someone who can track and shoot straight. A lawman, Emma said, smiling. It suits you better than a vigilante. That's what I figured. He cleared his throat nervously. Course, I'd need a place to stay while I get settled. Your cousin's husband mentioned he might have work for a man who knows horses. And there's a small cabin on their property that needs fixing up. Emma's smile widened. Are you asking my permission, Finn Irving? He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. I'm asking if you might be willing to let me court you properly, Emma Hawkins. Get to know each other in times that don't involve outlaws and emergency childbirth. A laugh bubbled up from Emma's throat, bright with joy and relief. I think I'd like that very much. Finn's answering smile transformed his face, erasing the weariness and the shadow of grief that had clung to him since they'd met. Tentatively, he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they enfolded hers. I can't promise it'll be easy, he said softly. I'm not a wealthy man, and I've got rough edges that might take some smoothing. Emma squeezed his hand. I'm not looking for easy, Finn, just real. From inside the house came the sound of James crying, his hungry wail carrying through the open window. Finn glanced toward the sound, then back to Emma. Your son needs you, he said. Yes, Emma agreed, and I'd like you to meet him properly. Not as a man who helped deliver him in an emergency, but as someone who might be part of his future. Understanding dawned in Finn's eyes, the weight and significance of what she was offering. I'd be honored, he said simply. Together they walked toward the house, their hands still joined, as the sun began its descent behind the mountains of Nevada Territory. Over the following months, Centralia witnessed the slow, steady blossoming of their relationship. True to his word, Finn took the position as deputy sheriff, bringing his tracking skills and quiet authority to the role. The town quickly came to respect the taciturn newcomer who had single-handedly captured the notorious Blackwell gang. Emma found work as a teacher's assistant at the small schoolhouse, her San Francisco education making her valuable in a frontier town hungry for learning. The arrangement allowed her to bring James with her, and the growing boy became a favorite among the school children who delighted in his cheerful temperament. Finn repaired the small cabin on Martha and Edward's property, adding improvements with each passing week. Though he lived there alone, he often joined Emma and James for dinner at the main house, gradually becoming part of their extended family. Edward appreciated Finn's knowledge of horses and mining, while Martha simply enjoyed seeing her cousin happy again. Through summer and into autumn, Finn courted Emma with a combination of old-fashioned formality and frontier practicality. There were wildflower bouquets left on her windowsill, but also fresh game for the dinner table and repairs made around Martha's house. He taught her to shoot a rifle for protection when he was away on deputy business, and she helped him learn to read better, his education having been spotty at best. Most evenings found them on the porch after James was asleep, talking of their pasts and cautiously beginning to plan a shared future. Emma learned that Finn had lost his parents to cholera when he was 14, leaving him and his older brother Caleb to fend for themselves. They had worked as ranch hands, freight haulers, and eventually stagecoach drivers, staying together until Caleb's murder. In turn, Emma shared stories of her childhood in San Francisco, her brief happy marriage to Thomas, and her fears about raising James alone in an uncertain world. Finn listened with a quietness that Emma came to recognize not as disinterest but as deep attention, absorbing every detail she offered about herself. As October painted the cottonwood trees gold, Finn finally worked up the courage to properly propose. He took Emma on a picnic to a meadow overlooking Centralia. James bundled warmly between them as they spread a blanket on the grass. The boy, now 5 months old, had begun to show a definite preference for Finn, gurgling happily whenever the tall man entered a room. "I've been thinking," Finn said as they watched James batting at falling leaves. "That cabin's getting pretty comfortable, but it's missing something important." "What's that?" Emma asked, though a flutter in her chest told her she already knew. "A family to fill it." Finn turned to face her fully. "Emma, I know I can't replace what you lost. I wouldn't try to. But I love you, you and James both, and I want to build something new together." Tears pricked Emma's eyes at his simple, heartfelt words. "We love you too, Finn. More than I thought possible when we first met." "Then will you marry me? Be my wife. Let me be a father to James." Emma's answer was to lean forward and kiss him, a gesture that had become familiar in recent weeks but no less thrilling. Against her lips, she felt Finn's smile. They were married in November in Centralia's small church, with Martha and Edward standing as witnesses and baby James dressed in a tiny suit that Martha had sewn for the occasion. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful, especially when Finn added his own vow to James, promising to love and protect the boy as his own son. The cabin became their home, enlarged by Finn's capable hands to include a proper bedroom for James and a small parlor where Emma could receive students for extra tutoring. Though modest by San Francisco standards, it was filled with warmth and laughter, becoming a haven for all three of them. Winter arrived with heavy snows that sometimes kept Finn away overnight when his duties took him to outlying areas. During these absences, Emma would stand at the window with James in her arms, watching for the first glimpse of her husband returning home through the drifts. The boy would squeal with delight at the sight of his adoptive father, reaching out small hands in welcome. On Christmas Eve, as a fire crackled in the hearth and pine boughs decorated the cabin with their spicy scent, Finn presented Emma with a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked, smiling as she accepted it. "Open it and see," he urged, an unusual nervousness in his manner. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of cotton, was a gold locket nearly identical to the one the outlaws had stolen from her during the stagecoach robbery. "Finn," she breathed, lifting it with trembling fingers. "How did you?" "I had it made by a jeweler in Virginia City," he explained. "I know it can't replace the original, but I thought—" Emma cut him off with a kiss. "It's perfect," she whispered against his lips. "Open it," he encouraged. She did, and tears filled her eyes. Inside were two tiny portraits, one of Thomas that she recognized as a copy of a photograph she kept, and one of Finn himself. "I thought James should know both his fathers," Finn said softly. "The one who gave him life, and the one who's blessed to help raise him." Emma clutched the locket to her heart, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "You are an extraordinary man, Finn Irving." He ducked his head, still uncomfortable with praise. "Just a man who found something worth living for, after thinking all that was left was revenge." As they sat together before the fire, James sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the terror of the stagecoach robbery to the joy of this quiet Christmas night, it had been a road of unexpected twists and precious discoveries. "What are you thinking?" Finn asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Emma leaned against his shoulder, savoring the solid strength of him beside her. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best, if we're brave enough to keep going." Finn's arm tightened around her. "Like a certain pregnant woman who survived a stagecoach robbery? And a certain cowboy who tracked outlaws for revenge but found love instead," she added, smiling up at him. Outside, snow began to fall again, adding fresh powder to the drifts that surrounded their cabin. But inside, warmth and contentment reigned as the small family celebrated their first Christmas together, with the promise of many more to come. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers across the Nevada hills. James took his first steps in the garden behind their cabin, toddling unsteadily from Emma to Finn with a look of triumph on his chubby face. The town of Centralia continued to grow, with new businesses opening along the main street and fresh silver strikes bringing prosperity to many. Finn had proven himself an excellent deputy, so much so that when Sheriff Daniels announced his retirement, the town council unanimously voted to offer Finn the position. The day he pinned on the sheriff's badge was one of quiet pride for both him and Emma, who recognized how far he had come from the vengeful tracker she'd first met. As summer approached again, Emma discovered she was expecting their first child together. When she shared the news with Finn, his joy was tempered with concern. "Are you worried about the birth?" he asked, remembering the circumstances of James's arrival. Emma shook her head, smiling. "No, because this time I'll have a proper doctor, a comfortable bed, and a husband who isn't quite so distracted by outlaws." Finn laughed, pulling her into an embrace. "I promise to be completely focused on you and nothing else." Their daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Irving, was born in January 1877, with her father pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the doctor invited him in to meet his child. Unlike James's dramatic entry into the world, Sarah's birth was straightforward and uncomplicated, for which everyone gave profound thanks. James, now a sturdy toddler of 18 months, regarded his baby sister with solemn curiosity before declaring her pretty in his limited vocabulary. The sight of her son and daughter together filled Emma with indescribable happiness, especially when Finn gathered all three of them in his strong arms. Life settled into a rhythm of domestic contentment, punctuated by the occasional excitement that came with Finn's job as sheriff. He maintained law and order with a firm but fair hand, earning respect throughout the county. Emma continued teaching part-time, her classroom now including both her children when lessons allowed. In 1879, they welcomed another son, Caleb Thomas Irving, named for both Finn's brother and Emma's first husband, a gesture that spoke volumes about the blended family they had created. James, now nearly 5, took his role as oldest brother very seriously, proudly helping with both Sarah and baby Caleb whenever permitted. The years passed, marked by the growth of their children and the strengthening of their love for each other. The small cabin was expanded again and again to accommodate their growing family, eventually becoming a proper house with a large porch where they gathered on summer evenings to watch the sunset. Finn never did return to tracking outlaws across the desert, finding greater satisfaction in preventing crime and maintaining peace in Centralia. Emma sometimes caught him staring thoughtfully at the mountains, and knew he was remembering the man he had been driven by grief and the need for vengeance, but those moments grew rarer as time healed old wounds. In 1885, on the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Finn surprised Emma by taking her back to the spot where the stagecoach had been attacked. The location, once a scene of terror and violence, had been transformed by nature's indifference. Desert flowers bloomed where blood had spilled, and no trace remained of that fateful day. "Why did you want to come here?" Emma asked as they stood together, looking out across the vast Nevada landscape. Finn took her hand, his touch as reassuring as it had been when he'd carried her to safety a decade earlier. "To remind myself how close I came to missing everything that matters. If I'd been an hour later that day, or if you hadn't been so brave." Emma squeezed his fingers. "But you weren't late, and we both did what we had to do." He nodded, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package. "I had this made for you, a remembrance." Inside was a silver brooch shaped like a stagecoach wheel, with 5 small birthstones embedded in the silver one for each member of their family. "It's beautiful," Emma said, tracing the design with her fingertip. "A perfect reminder that even the hardest journeys can lead to wonderful destinations." Finn kissed her then, with all the tenderness and passion that had characterized their decade together. When they parted, he kept her close in his arms, unwilling to let go even for a moment. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed. "After Caleb died, I figured I'd either catch his killers or die trying. I never imagined a wife, children, a home. And now," Emma prompted. His smile was answer enough, but he spoke the words anyway. "Now I can't imagine my life any other way." As they rode back to Centralia, where their children waited with Martha and Edward, Emma reflected on the strange, wonderful path that had brought her to this happiness. From the terror of the stagecoach robbery to the joy of the family she and Finn had built together, it had been a journey of unexpected turns and precious discoveries. The setting sun gilded the distant mountains, painting the Nevada sky in shades of gold and crimson that mirrored the warmth in Emma's heart. Beside her, Finn rode tall in the saddle, still the vigilant protector but now motivated by love rather than vengeance. Ahead lay their home, their children, and all the days yet to come in their shared life. Some journeys, Emma knew, weren't measured in miles but in the growth of the heart. And by that measure, she and Finn had traveled farther than either could have dreamed on that dust-choked day when fate had thrown them together in the vast Nevada desert.